Morning, hello, and welcome. If you are a student curious about how privacy laws are shaping the digital economy, or a professional navigating compliance in your industry, or a business leader responsible for safeguarding user data, this series is for you. In this video series, we'll explore India's landmark Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, a transformative law that defines how personal data is collected, stored, used, and protected in a digital era. But we are not just scratching the surface. This is a deep dive across 8 focused parts where we break down the impact of the DPDP Act on some of India's most data driven and compliance sensitive industry, namely the BFSI sector, where consent, risk, reporting rules are redefining how banks and insurers operate. We look at IT service industry where global delivery centers must align with both Indian laws and client expectations. We'll then look at the healthcare sector where patients' rights and sensitive data demand ironclad protection. We look at the hospitality industry, wherein managing trust, identity, and personal preferences of millions of guests is paramount. We'll then look at the educational sector, where children's data is at the center of privacy enforcement. We'll then touch base on the world of marketing and sales, where consent is now the backbone of every outreach strategy. And finally, the social media industry, navigating new restrictions around profiling, tracking, and child safety. So, whether you are preparing for compliance in your organization or simply want to stay informed, this series is designed to simplify the law, contextualize the impact, and guide you through practical next steps. So, grab a cup of coffee, stay tuned, and let's together decode the DPDP Act one sector at a time. Digital Personal Data Protection Act, its impact on the hospitality sector. Part 5. As part of this part, we would be covering the impact the DPDP Act has on the hospitality sector. We will be looking first starting off with the introduction, then why the hospitality sector is affected, the roles under the DPDP Act, key DPDP obligations for the hospitality operators. We'll cover the common personal data collected in hospitality sector from a DPDP perspective. Overlaps with other legal requirements. We'll cover technology, apps, and digital service considerations. We look at the breach scenarios that need response. We look at the impact on the business operations. We look at key action areas for hospitality operators. Then we'll go at DPDP Act compliance checklist for the hospitality sector. And then we'll close off this session with a conclusion. Why the hospitality sector is affected? Well, the hospitality sector handles large volume of personal data daily. Could be name, address, ID proof, preferences, payment info, travel history, dietary needs, health info, etc. The hospitality sector relies heavily on third party integration like booking platforms, point of sale systems, payment gateways, loyalty programs, and digital check ins. The sector is increasingly digitized through apps, kiosks, websites, and automated guest services. This makes it directly accountable under the DPDP Act as a data fiduciary. Let's look at the roles under the DPDP Acts. From a stakeholder perspective, we have hotel chains, OTAs, food apps. Under DPDP, these are categorized as data fiduciaries. They are the one who decides why and how a data is collected. From a second stakeholder are tech vendors, whether it's a PMS, CRM, cloud host. Under DPDP, these are known as categorized as data processors. They act on behalf of the fiduciaries. The next stakeholder are large global hotel brands, super apps. Under DPDP, these are categorized as significant data fiduciaries. Example, handling massive volume or high risk area. Let's look at key DPDP obligations for hospitality operators. Well, from an obligation perspective, they must provide clear reasons for data collection during check ins, bookings, or app use. They cannot over collect. The data collected for booking can't be used for aggressive marketing unless consented. The users must be able to revoke the permission if required to, decided by the users. Personal data must be deleted once the purpose is served or on request. They need to report data breaches to Data Protection Board and affected customers within 72 hours as per the draft rules. They must verify age, avoid profiling, tracking, and targeting children under 18. They must provide accessible channels for users to raise privacy concerns and complaints. Let's now look at the common personal data collected in hospitality sector. The data could be names, mobile numbers, emails, government IDs, payment data, could be travel history and preferences, could be loyalty program activities, could be health data, could be location data, or video footages. This data or these data are considered sensitive and must be handled with heightened care. Let's now look at from how how this act overlaps with other legal requirements. Well, this is DPDP can be reviewed with respect to few of the acts. It could be the IT Act or a local act or the Health Ministry Act or RBI or PSCID says or contractual obligations. When you look at from IT Act perspective, this was previously used for privacy enforcement. So the DPDP has a overlap or a conflict, possible conflict with IT Act. In this condition, it is an overlap. When you look at the local police or the hotel ID norms, need to balance privacy with legal ID retention requirement. Do note, if the user after checking in, checking out, wants the data to be deleted, if that is done, then it is a case of not able to track out a user who has come in, stayed. From a police perspective, this is serious because then, in case of a crime, there is no evidence or who stayed where. So there is a conflict here. So there would be a requirement on how that is to be balanced out. From a health ministry perspective, the DPDP records, if we are making it as private, which is actually the case, and if it is get deleted, then in case of a medical emergency or things, if it is deleted, then it is very difficult to diagnose in case of a medical emergency. How that has to be managed. From a PCI RBI requirement perspective, it might overlap with the payment security. Contractual obligation, it's a shared responsibility for data breaches and user rights handling. So these are some of the areas where there might be a conflict or an overlap. Let's now look at the technology, app, and digital service consideration from that perspective. Well, they must embed consent form and notices in booking engines, mobile apps for check-ins, service request, loyalty account creation and redemption. They should implement data masking for front desk operators. The sector, when we say they, this is the sector, the hospitality sector. The sector requires data masking for front desk operators, session timeouts and secure logins in their apps, cookie banners and opt ins for website tracking, auto deletion logic in the backend after checkout, if not legally required. When you look at from a breach scenario that need response, the point of sale or booking engine hack, they need to have some responses in case of a breach. The breach can happen in form of loyalty point theft or exfiltration of guest passport IDs, misuse of biometric data, or data shared with third parties without consent. Breach reporting must include who was affected, what data was exposed, and what action is being taken. As we move forward, let's look at impact on business operations. From a benefit perspective, it builds great trust in digital first brands. It boosts global alignment, especially with GDPR compliant platforms. It helps consolidate data governance across multiple hotel brands and platforms. From a challenge perspective, it's about rewriting consent workflows at multiple guest touchpoints. It's about retrofitting privacy controls into legacy PMS or CRM systems. And it's also about managing multi vendor risk. So, these are the challenges that we see for this sector from a DPDP Act perspective. Let's now look at the key action areas for hospitality operator. The first is they need to map all guest data, source, usage, and flow. Then need to implement digital consent collection at bookings, check-ins, loyalties. They would require updated contracts with channel partners, cloud vendors, food delivery partners, etc. They, for large chains or OTA, they're likely to classify as SDF, so there would be additional control that would be required, hence a DPO appointment would be needed. They would need to add privacy compliant tabs on websites and apps. They would require to train front desk, housekeeping, call center on privacy obligations. They would now require to encrypt their ID data, secure backup, and segregate logs. Let's look at checklist. How to go about navigating DPDP for the sector, the requirements of DPDP Act. The checklist for hospitality service sector to implement the requirement of the DPDP Act 2023 across all operational, technical, and customer facing areas. Do note this checklist applies to hotels, resorts, homestays, online travel aggregators, food deliveries and event booking platforms, loyalty and reward programs, guest experience apps, and property management systems or PMS. Starting off with the governance and strategy aspect. You need to first appoint a privacy compliance leader or a data protection officer. It's mandatory for SDF cases. You need to identify whether your brand, chain, or aggregator qualify as a significant data fiduciary. You need to create a privacy and data governance committee which should include legal, IT, front desk, operations, marketing. You need to approve a DPDP compliance roadmap with executive sponsorship. You will require to assign data protection responsibilities across regions, brand, or properties. Once you cover these aspects, you then move to the next part, which is data discovery and flow mapping phase. In this, you need to identify all types of personal data that you collect, which could be ID, health, payment, references. Then you need to map an end to end data flow, right from booking, check in, stay, checkout, feedbacks, and retention. You need to inventorize all systems that store or process the data, which includes your property management system or PMS, point of sales or POS, CRM, loyalty platforms, guest Wi Fi and app services, CCTV, and access control systems. Then you need to flag sensitive or special categories, which could be health, biometric, children's data, etc. Once you have covered this aspect in its full, then we move to the next part, which is looking at the consent and the notice management aspect. In this, you need to review all data collection points, which includes the website, app, front desk, kiosk, booking engines, etc. Then you need to display clear, specific, and multilingual notice explaining what data is collected, for what purpose, with whom it may be shared, how to withdraw consent if any, implement explicit consent mechanism including mobile online booking, loyalty sign-ups, facial recognition based check-ins, etc. Once done, then you have to provide guests the ability to withdraw the consent at any given point of time, where the guest can choose and need to be able to choose that. Once you have covered this aspect in its full, we need to move to the next phase, which is data principal rights handling. You need to enable the guest to request access. They should be able to do correction. They should be able to delete of their data via either web portal, customer care, or on site service desk. You will require to create a standard operating procedure or SOP for verifying guest identity, forwarding requests to data processor or affiliates, logging and resolving within expected timelines. You will require to enable right to nominate a representative for incapacitated or deceased guests. Once you have covered all of these aspects, then we move to the next part of data minimization, retention, and erasure. Data minimization, retention, and erasure. You need to review and reduce the data collection field across booking forms, feedback surveys, membership apps. You need to set a retention period by category. Could be like 3 years for billing, 6 months of CCTV, etc. You will require to automate data purging and archival process post checkout or consent withdrawal. Then you need to clean up stale records from legacy systems and spreadsheets. Once you have covered this, you move to the next phase of for data security and breach preparedness. As part of this activity or this phase, you need to implement industry standard controls, which include encryption for stored ID copies, secure API integration with OTAs and food delivery partners. You need to implement MFA for admin dashboards. Then you need to enable access login to guest data for audit trails. You need to build or update data breach response standard operating procedures, which could be 72 hours of reporting to the board as per the draft. Communication plan for affected individuals, coordination with certain if breach involves cybersecurity, run breach response drills for IT operations and front desk. The next part is third party and vendor compliance. In this, you need to have an inventory and risk rank all third parties, wherein You need to inventorize the booking engines, the various portals that you use, the various payment gateways that you have, the various loyalty programs that you might have incorporated into your system, housekeeping or guest services apps that are required as part of your services. You will require to update contract to include DPDP compliant data processing clauses, breach notification duties, consent alignment, and data return clauses. You need to obtain periodic data privacy certifications or self attestation from critical vendors. Once you have covered this, then we move to the next critical part of children's data compliance. In this, you need to determine if any service targets children or collects data of guests under 18. You need to implement verifiable parental consent for data collection. You need to avoid targeted advertising, profiling, or behavioral analytics. Then you need to consider child friendly policies in spa, kids, clubs, or gaming areas. Once you have covered it, then you move to the digital channels and app compliance area space. You have to redesign hotel apps and kiosks to present privacy notice before logging or use. You need to offer granular consent control. You need to review use of cookies and tracking pixels on websites. You need to enable data deletion or account closure feature for any of the or all of your app users. You need to encrypt data sent via mobile check-ins or QR menus or feedback forms. Post that critical aspect, you move to the next one, which is about loyalty and marketing programs. In this, you would need to clearly separate marketing consent from general terms and conditions. You need to allow guests to opt out of promotions and targeting at any given point of time. You would need to avoid using data for cross sellings without separate consent. You need to monitor use of third party marketing or analytics tool for compliance. Once this is cleared off, you need to then move to the next section, which is grievance redressal system. In this, you need to set up a dedicated email, chatbot, or hotline for privacy compliance. You need to define workflow for acknowledgement, investigation, resolution within 30 days. You will require to train staff to escalate privacy complaints to the DPO or designated officer. Then you need to set up your system to log all grievances and maintain status record for future audits. Once you have covered this, then we move to staff awareness and training area. In this, you need to train or design your training for your front office and guest service staff on data handling and their consent. You'll need the housekeeping staff and CCTV teams to be trained on data confidentiality. You need to train your IT and admin team on breach preventions. You need to include the DPDP module in every new hire orientation. You will require to run a quarterly awareness drive, quizzes, or posters at staff only zones. Once this aspect is cleared, then we move to monitoring, audit, and reporting. As part of this, you need to maintain a DPDP compliance dashboard tracking consent records, breach events, grievance status, and vendor assessment. You will require to conduct internal audits at least annually. You need to stay updated with the MITE notification, that is Ministry of Engineering and IT notification. You need to stay updated with sector specific advisory, whether it's a tourism board or the local regulators. And you need to prepare for voluntary undertaking or audits by the Data Protection Board. Let's take a sector by sector look at how the DPDP Act 2023 impacts different industries. Because compliance isn't one size fit all. I have compiled a comparative table covering BFSI, IT services, healthcare, hospitality, education, marketing and sales, and the social media industry. So let's break it down. Consent management. Well, consent is the cornerstone of DPDP Act, but its implementation varies. In BFSI, consent must be tightly managed, especially for KYC, biometrics, and financial information. In healthcare, it's even more sensitive. Patients and parents' consent is absolutely critical. For marketing and social media, consent isn't just required, it defines whether your outreach is legal or violation. When it comes to children's data, this is where the act is more stringent or most stringent. Educational institutions and social media platforms are directly in the spotlight here. Under DPDP, profiling or targeting anyone under 18 is strictly restricted. And verifiable parent consent becomes non negotiable. Do note, verifiable. The organization need to have a mechanism where it can prove that the parental consent was indeed from the parent. Next, on the data rights enablement perspective, all sectors must now empower users to access, correct, or delete their data. That means banks, schools, hospitals, hotels, and even digital marketers need process and tools to honor these rights, preferably through user friendly portals. When it comes to breach notification, every sector is now bound to notify the Data Protection Board, and in most cases, the affected individual within 72 hours of discovering a breach. In healthcare, this could be patient's record. In hospitality, it could be passport scan. Or for social media, a profile leak or consent compromise could trigger serious reputational and legal consequence. When it comes to third party or vendor risk perspective, here's where the rubber meets the road. Whether you are a bank outsourcing IT, a school using a learning app, or a marketing team working with an agency, the DPDP Act expects you to own the responsibility for your vendor's privacy posture. Data processing agreements and audits are no longer optional, they are essential. When it comes to grievance redressal, the DPDP Act mandates every organizations to have a clear, accessible grievance mechanism. This might look like a chatbot, an email, or an in-app feature. And it's especially critical for social platforms, hotels, and edtech apps that serves diverse digital first users. Well, likelihood of being classified as a significant data fiduciaries? Well, lastly, we assess the SDF risk across sectors. It is high for BFSI, IT, healthcare, and social media because of the sheer volume and sensitivity of data they process. For educational and hospitality, it is medium to high, especially if you are running large networks. And for marketing, if you're handling mass personalization and cross platform tracking, the risk goes up fast. So, as you can see, while the principle of the DPDP Act remains universal, the real world implication differs greatly depending on the sectors. Some industry will need to overhaul their tech infrastructure, while others will need to fix their lead generation or outreach tactics. But for all of us, it's a journey towards being more transparent, ethical, and user centric data practice. In the next part, we'll deep dive into each sector one by one. So stay tuned and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you are finding this series helpful. Do note this slide we will come again and again on all the modules that we are going to discuss. So, in case you have missed out or you need to have a better context, so when we look at BFSI and IT services and all the other areas, we will refresh this slide again and the context. In conclusion, in the hospitality sector, trust is built one guest at a time, and privacy is part of that trust. DPDP compliance is not just legal hygiene, it's a brand reputation strategy. The DPDP Act will reshape data responsibilities across the hospitality sector, from budget hotels to five-star brands. Compliance is not just about avoiding fines, it's about building customer trust, protecting digital reputation, and positioning for privacy conscious global travelers. Operators who take proactive steps now will be the winner in a privacy first travel economy. With this, we have come to the end of part 5, wherein we looked at impact of DPDP Act on hospitality sector. I hope this session has helped you in some way. And if you think that this could be useful for any of your colleagues and friends, do share it accordingly. Do like and subscribe if you think this has added value to your table. With this, I'd like to close up this session and move to the part 6. We look at a different sector and how DPDP Act impacts that. This is your host, Savit Vittal Salian. Namaskar.